Donald Trump is legally naked at this point. He doesn't have the powers of the presidency, some of which do afford a different level of review. He certainly used that to delay his tax returns ever getting to this probe. Now they have them. He doesn't have Bill Barr, who may have, according to DOJ veterans who demanded his resignation at a higher number than any AG in history. He doesn't have an attorney general using or abusing those expansive powers to buy him time, to get him tricks of the trade, to get the other story we were going to cover until this broke today, to get him to try to basically defang some of what Andrew Weissmann and Bob Mueller worked on in their fact-finding. That's the other big story of how Barr was doing that through the Office of Legal Counsel. He also doesn't have, as you say, the armaments that many fancy rich people do have, which is all the fancy lawyers. You could watch a movie or Billions or anything and see how, oh, boy, if you have enough lawyers, sometimes that can make a difference. Well, as you say, not in the grand jury room because you're in there alone, pressed on these questions in a very serious way. As for what you mentioned, the reporting last night, which Nicole also mentioned, we try to follow the witnesses around here because if we said this, Andrew, back in your day with Mueller, and we say it with Cy Vance, if the investigators want to talk to these people, well, journalistically, then we do too. Here's some of what they told us in that interview last night. What is the word or subject that investigators asked most about?
All the money. Taxes.
Alan Weisselberg. They're going to flip on each other like it's going out of style.
I'm in segment. Neil?
Yeah, so I think, all of that, plus they also made the very simple point, which is this is like a classic prisoner's dilemma right now. So even if all of the different people want to be loyal to Trump, they all are being told by prosecutors, and they know that unless they come in and cooperate, someone else may flip against them. And Donald Trump is not exactly the kind of guy who inspires loyalty. So you can't sit there if you're one of the other people and think, oh, Trump's not going to turn on me. Of course he will. And they know that ahead of time. And so they're much more likely, even if they have loyalty in their bones, to turn on Donald Trump. And, grand juries, of course, have the power to issue subpoenas on their own, which is another, I think, important point. They can ask all of those three people and others for documents and other things. And prosecutors now don't have to rely on, Rudy Giuliani to tell them what they're looking for on live TV. They've got the powers themselves through the grand jury to get this material.
We have more from that I want to play for analysis. Michael Cohen is someone who figured into both probes, although Mueller ultimately handed him off to the federal prosecutors in New York for viewers keeping track because Donald Trump has a lot of different legal problems. This is not SDNY, the feds. This is the local prosecutors, which have maximum autonomy. They have nothing to do with the federal government. It's the New York Attorney General and the New York DA. It's Harvey Dent for those who are using the Batman lens, which sometimes can be helpful. So, Andrew, given that you dealt with some of these individuals on your side, I have to ask you before I get to Cohen, who I mentioned was in both probes, do you have any sense of deja vu, and do you have any sense of whether this time would somehow be different?
Well, I do think there is a reason to think that this time might be different, and that is that if you look at Neil talking about the classic prisoner's dilemma, that's not something that we really had because when Trump was president, he had the power to pardon. And so you could build a really strong case against an Alan Weisselberg and still the person wouldn't flip. Look at Paul Manafort, look at Roger Stone, because they could hold out for a pardon. That is no longer a power that Donald Trump has. And he does not have the power to fire the prosecutor. So we were in the very unusual situation of investigating somebody who had the power to pull the plug on the entire investigation, as well as our boss was somebody appointed by the President of the United States. All of that.
Did that affect you guys?
And now I'm sorry?
Did that affect you guys?
Yeah, well, certainly the power to pardon, and I think the power to fire us also affected us. So I think both of those are powers that I think are really big, important powers that are very unusual in any criminal case that Dan, Neil, or I have ever been involved in. And now Trump is just like any other person who is subject to a criminal investigation with no ability to control the prosecutors or to control the witnesses.
And Daniel, who can fire Cy Vance?
Well, theoretically, the voters, or in some cases, rare cases, the governor. But that's just not going to happen, right? He's not running for re-election. His term ends December 31st, and so there's going to be a new DA on January 1st. That gives us every indication that he wants to make this decision in advance. And 6 months from now, when this grand jury expires, he'll still be the DA. So I do think that he is pushing for that decision. I will say that New York grand juries are more cumbersome than federal grand juries. Neil and Andrew are right that they're very powerful and they have, but they also generally can't receive hearsay evidence. They have to hear things, directly from the mouths of witnesses, which in federal courts, it was a huge advantage when I was a federal prosecutor to be able to put an agent on the stand and present a case that's pretty complex in maybe 2 or 3 hours, just based on the investigation they did. In state court, we have to present the actual witness. So it's kind of a big deal. And they all get automatic immunity, which also creates some complications. So there are reasons why I think the state grand jury is going to sit 3 days a week. It's actually not that unusual. They're probably sitting a morning or an afternoon only, would be my guess. But again, we're still speculating here.
Well, and you're all making important points which speak to why it may be a very bad night at Mar-a-Lago. Daniel, you're picking up on something that Andrew was walking us through earlier, which is that the doubling down, the tripling down on the normal grand jury schedule is something that shows an intensity and acceleration of the case. Bad news for anyone at Trump.org. Donald Trump runs Trump.org. Then number two, you're reminding everyone, because I don't think everyone around the country is keeping track of every local official's tenure plans, that this New York DA is out. You're reminding everyone at the end of the year, and the 6-month schedule. Again, walk me through this if there's more precision needed. But the roughly 6-month expected schedule of this grand jury would bring you out to roughly November, right? So you're saying that the implication of what you're saying legally, anything can change. Lord, we know that from following cases. But you're saying the legal schedule would be that this matter, you would expect there to be action, or if they close it out with no action, you would expect to know that either way by roughly November with regard to whether crimes are charged at Trump.org, Daniel?
November or before. I think that it all depends. And as we were saying earlier, we don't know exactly who's going to be charged. Right now, clearly Alan Weisselberg is in the crosshairs, and there are lots of different levers and points of pressure with him, including his family, his kids. So we'll see what they're going to do. But, within the Trump organization, there are other executives, there's family members of Donald Trump, there's the companies themselves, and there's Donald Trump. So this grand jury is going to be doing a lot of work. No doubt they're going to be using it in an investigative way, as Neil mentioned, issuing subpoenas, compelling people who don't want to testify. So this is really using the grand jury, I think, to the fullest extent of what it's meant to be.
Yeah, and it raises a lot of questions about Weisselberg, which we're going to have more special coverage on tonight, and that's why we convened that special exclusive panel last night, because we're looking at this from the outside. We don't have all of the access that the three of you have had at various points in these kind of cases, but as outsiders, we're kind of tracking, boy, a lot going on around Weisselberg, and he could be the key. Before I lose this panel of experts, and I have a lot more people waiting in the wings on a news night like this, I want to go to each of you lightning round in a word or a sentence, answers to the big questions here. Number one, in summation, what changes today for Trump.org, and who has the most to worry about? What changes, and who has the most to worry about in a word or a sentence, starting with Andrew?
Weisselberg has the most to worry about, and what changes is he's facing a lot more exposure.
Neil?
Trump has the most to fear because he knows Weisselberg has the most to fear, and Weisselberg will flip. And that's very, very bad news for Donald Trump. Weisselberg knows where the bodies are buried.
Daniel? What changes is that it's public, that the DA is going for indictments for sure. Like, we now know that. And I think Donald Trump, at the end of the day, has the most to worry about. Even if he's not indicted, this is all bad news for Donald Trump.